We had actually open book festival on the weekend. And
So what you
came from the country, like designers, management. People are looking at me with one eye going, what is opening there? Which is it is. So yeah, and it's cool. I think anything on Sunday was a poetry and poem session. And so rather than came and listen to poetry, poetry, and I'm like, this is very much outside of my comfort zone. It's very good. Yeah, it's a relationship.
Why you said it is still
There's a new film I'm working on. It takes a while to make these things. I can't just be pushing them out. It's longer than a baby.
It's called Teacher.
I did actually get you.
I'll just type in VCTL scientist.
Hello. Good morning, everyone. And welcome to the 2019 Research Day. So sorry about the crowd. I got news this morning that the traffic is so heavy and people are coming in slowly. I was also stuck in traffic for over an hour, which is something that usually takes me about 30 minutes. So I can understand that as well. Today we're going to have something very special, being that we are all special in our ways, okay? Everyone is special. And for me, what is so important about the research we're going to do is we're also going to highlight beyond what we do at the university, what external stakeholders also take out from our research is something that is very useful. And within the context of health sector reforms and the National Health Insurance that is on board, we think that the theme of this research day, which is innovations in public health, or towards innovation in public health, is something that really fits nicely with the current reforms happening. And I would want us to take a few moments to acknowledge challenges that are happening within the country, especially femicide and xenophobic attacks. These are not things that we as a community of public health practitioners should take lightly. We should stand up and say a woman is also a human. Something that we need to either create a hashtag or something. A woman is also a human. So without further ado, I would want to invite our distinguished guest of honor, who is going to open up the floor for us. And please, it's an honor and pleasure to welcome Professor Sue Harrison, who is the Deputy Vice Chancellor in charge of Research and Internationalization at UCT. She would talk to us about research and give us some words of wisdom, possibly help us to see how we can also forge ahead on the research front. So without further ado, I welcome you. Please, a round of applause.
Thanks very much, John. So it's a real pleasure to be here this morning. Right at the beginning of my term as Deputy Vice Chancellor, and I come out of a very active research space myself, so I know how really important these research days are. And I'm absolutely sure your ranks are going to fill as the day goes on. And I was looking through the program of this event, and I think particularly important because of what a diverse grouping of people you are. And in some of the spaces that I've run research over the years, the same sort of thing. It always intrigues me with these days how we come to know what our colleagues are doing, and how easy it is to work in the same department or the same center or the same whatever without a full understanding of the new exciting things which are happening in our colleagues' lives. And I always find these days exciting because at the end of the day, somebody's made a connection with somebody else because actually their work took them over the last year since you last did this into a space that is mutually actually supportive. And so I hope you do have those great moments during today. For us in other parts of the university over the years, wearing both my DVC hat and my hat as a researcher, the Department of Public Health is viewed by many people outside of this space as such an important department. There are so many people around the university who are looking for ways to get this team of people involved in their research projects because of how you cut across the things that we're trying to do in this university around engage scholarship around dealing with some of the real big issues that we work with. And two examples which come directly out of things that I do are the importance of public health in how we handle water. So Future Water, the Interdisciplinary Research Institute, which I set up and ran for a couple of years and have handed some things over, we fully acknowledge the importance of public health in that activity, and we're really pleased that Akil Dalvi has been working with some of the civil engineers over the last while in projects looking at how our care of rivers impacts the societies that live around them. Some really exciting work, and exciting to bring public health experts together with engineers, together with anthropologists, together with town planners. Exciting things to do. And the other thing, which is running on campus over yesterday and today, is a big GCRF project on dust, which comes out of our mining space. So our whole approach to how do we sustainably use our mineral resources. Obviously, the resources aren't sustainable, but we can use them in a sustainable way. But dust in the mining space is a huge issue with huge deaths, as I'm sure many of you in this room know. And so the links between the process engineers and the mining engineers and the public health specialists. I'm trying to think who Jenny's got in that room, and they're probably here today and not there. There's somebody from public health, I just can't get the name out. Sorry?
Shahida Adams.
That's who it is, thank you very much. Yes, she was sitting at the table next to me yesterday. And so it shows how, it's just two spaces which come out of my own research life, which show just how important the work that you do here is. I think we'll see over the next little while, particularly with me in the portfolio that I am, a big move to try and raise the profile of our interdisciplinary research in UCT, and to try and make it easier for us to work across these kind of boundaries, because we all know that it's quite difficult to work across departments and faculties and so on at UCT. I think most of us who do work which relates to that know that there's quite a lot of pain in that. So I think that's one of the things we really need to try and do if we're going to tackle grand challenges, and if we're going to do research which is relevant to the citizens of our country and our continent. We have to get right working in this interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary way, and we have to know what the bottlenecks are. So I think this is a bit of an open invitation. I can't tell you that I'm going to be able to solve things immediately, but if I don't know what's getting in the way, I won't solve it. If I do know, I'll do my best job, and some things might take a while. So yeah, I think let's, as researchers in UCT, work together to make this inter-transdisciplinary space really work for us, and so to be able to carry on tackling some really important research which will benefit our country. And with that, I wish you a really great research day. I'd very much like to be here for a longer piece of time, but I'm literally going to sit here for a few minutes, listen to you start and disappear off. It's not because I'm not interested, it's because there are various things happening at UCT and various other things in the schedule. So yeah, I wish you a really good day. Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much, Sue. It's always a pleasure to listen to you talk. And something she also forgot to add is the issue of SDGs and how it cuts across multiple disciplines, which she is currently leading. So thanks so much for that. Well, when the boss is here, I mean.
So that's a good thing to note. UCT is really trying to position its research around the SDGs and to not to change what we do, but to show off how what we do is relevant in the SDG space. Also, to acknowledge that the SDG space is focused on really trying to tackle a lot of the challenges, but the SDGs have also been created in the different part of the world to where we sit. And so we're very much trying to work out how do we bring the SDG agenda to actually really tackling what we need to tackle in Africa. So without just accepting it exactly as is and dancing to it exactly as is. So one of the exciting things we're doing for April next year is that we're organising an SDG summit. So this has come out of a request from the Vice Chancellor and is being done in collaboration with some of our university networks that we belong to. So I don't know if you all know the International Association of Research Universities. It has the 10 Ivy League universities and us. So we're the only Southern Hemisphere university. We were added as the 11th. We are the only university in Africa, and the others are places like Yale and Oxford and Cambridge and Copenhagen and very high-ranking universities. So their presidents meet here in April of next year, and alongside that we will have this SDG summit. It will be organized with them, with ARUA, the African Research Universities Association, and with the Worldwide University Networks. So this will give us a space to really frame the questions we want to be dealing with around the SDGs, and potentially to be able to build collaborations in these networks, because all these networks are looking for research collaborations. UCT is a really important connector between Africa and these high-ranking university countries. So to really frame the questions, and to frame the questions from our vantage point rather than from a developed world vantage point, and hopefully to be able to put together active collaborations which will be conceived during the summit. So I think it's an exciting space, and we have John on our steering committee, so he's a good feedback for the rest of you. And hopefully this will open up some new opportunities for us. So let's see whether we manage to do it right and open all the opportunities we'd like. But whatever we do, we'll have some very good conversations which are aimed at putting Africa's needs at the center of the SDGs rather than SDGs conceived out of the developed world framework.
Thank you again. I think we can see how important interdisciplinary research, multidisciplinary, and all the disciplinary research is very useful. Thank you again for your words, and I think we now see that there are many initiatives happening that we can plug into at UCT. We don't necessarily need to be bound by the artificial boundaries of discipline. So without further ado, I would want to welcome our first panel. The chair is Zara, and Zara is from the School of Division of Social and Behavioral Sciences at our department. Thank you. You have 30 minutes. Up to you. But you can shout.
Can everybody hear if I speak volume? Oh, for recording. No, I'll try and do this. Okay, thanks everybody. Thanks, John. I'm Zara from the Division of Social and Behavioral Sciences. This morning I'm just going to give a very brief overview of our research and training portfolios. And I'm timekeeping for myself, so I'm going to go to this little thing over here. But shout if I'm going way over. So over the last 6 years, DSBS has established itself as a Centre for Critical Social and Behavioral Sciences research and teaching in the school. We work in many different content areas, often because students or researchers from other departments or other parts of the university who are interested in incorporating qualitative research methods approach us. But our two core research areas are gender and HIV, and I suppose secondary research area is tuberculosis. Sorry, I'm not used to the mics. Our own projects are often mixed methods, but we always aim to understand why and how things are happening, and we use qualitative social science influenced theories and methodologies to get there. So on the point of our first research area, I just wanted to very briefly show you this new site we've launched, which is around one of our biggest projects, towards building theory and evidence around men, masculinities, and HIV, with a specific focus on gender transformative initiatives. Not sure, there we go, okay. Cool, so I just want to very briefly skip through here, just to suggest that everyone has a look some other time. You can go through and see a little bit more about what we're up to in Dialogue. Cool. We've also had a strong focus over the last 6 years on training towards a new generation of social scientists working in HIV and public health.
We worked on building cohorts. Postgraduate studies are often very lonely, as we know, through a series of group activities and events, and on growing the mentoring component of postgraduate studies in the division and the school. We're now moving towards consolidating these gains by focusing on postmasters, i.e. PhD and postdoctoral candidates, to build a cohort or series of cohorts again, to pilot some coursework to go along with the critical stages of a PhD or a postdoc process. We're experimenting with cascading mentorship, which is a fancy way of saying, postdocs mentor PhDs, PhDs mentor master students, etc. And providing, again, short course targeted training for kind of key learning areas, including grant writing and for researcher independence post-studies. Finally, we have a very strong commitment in the division to responsive and community-engaged research and to alternative forms of dissemination, especially to the communities in which we work. Related to this, we support the work and capacity building of a series of initiatives in Tamtuka, Ilicha, and Gugulethu. And we are interested in disseminating the research more widely than just to policymakers and other researchers. So in this vein, in July this year, we held the second annual Gugulethu UCT Research Indaba after the first event last year was very successful. So it was hosted and organized by one of our collaborators, the Movement for Change and Social Justice, who are based in Gugs. DSBS was the key UCT partner, but this time we also included and invited others in the school who work in Gugs. And Sonke Gender Justice was our key NGO partner in the area. And finally, a big part of the work that's happening around IALAM, which is the Masculinities and HIV project I referred to earlier, is around working with community, university or other research partners, NGOs and health services, in contrast to just the more kind of binary groupings that can often happen. So I just want to show you, it's a very first draft of a video about the research in Indaba. It will go through another draft, but
I think we also recognize that we might need to render services in a slightly different way if we're going to appeal to men, or we're going to get the kind of numbers that we want as men in our programs.
But there are those who are bedridden, cannot really come to the hospital for medication. And you need to send someone. You've got mobile clinics. Those people who are sitting in that mobile clinic, those mobile clinics, they are still there, they are operating. Well, we find a way of doing it. So now here we are, coming up with solutions here. We need to bring this positive forces together so as to find a universal solution.
And so talking about in when people are men are struggling to, for example, to know, to go and test and know what their HIV status is?
So basically, ILAM is really a project that really focuses on men and HIV, really mobilizing men to come forward to work with researchers and all that. But it is really, our interest is to link men and retain them in the HIV cascade of care. So it's a program there that means come near. So we really want to use this intervention to strengthen it with the research that we are proposing to do, to strengthen it so that it can be aligned to the needs and the unique needs and challenges of adult men who are recently diagnosed with HIV.
Many of the people who will speak today will be talking about men and HIV. But this year we also wanted to bring some other research. So it's not only men and HIV, but it's also work about health committees and about pregnant women who are living with HIV.
I would say that it was the most difficult thing to tell my father about my pregnancy, because telling him this and witnessing him that I'm exposed and raising the daughter, the eldest child, I still feel like I failed my parents, because what kind of older daughter am I?
What I'm doing right now is I'm asking people about which ideas could work and which ideas couldn't. I do research in Hanover Park regarding men and HIV, getting men tested, linking them to care, staying on medication. I think the purpose of ILM is bringing people together, especially if we're talking about a population that doesn't really come to healthcare facilities, doesn't really feel empowered in their health. Bringing people together, communities, organizations is the best way to kind of bring together ideas and motivate people. I mean, that's exactly what happened in that room. I had people who don't live in the same area as me give me very sound advice. So,
Sorry, just in the interest of time, I'm going to cut that short. But that was just sort of a whistle stop into, through some of what is going on in the division at the moment. Sorry, hold on one second. And for more information, these links are a good place to go. I think the way that I'm going to run this session is to try and have 5 minutes at the end for questions. So we're going to have 3 presentations now from some of my colleagues in the division. And at the end, if everyone could just save any questions they might have, and we'll have a few minutes at the end. Thanks very much for your time. I'll introduce my colleague Nonzozo Mbokasi, who's also the coordinator of the ILM research project. Thanks.
Morning, everyone. Today I'll be presenting on the healthcare providers' perspectives on strategies for better engaging men in HIV care in Cape Town. Important to note is that this study builds on a study which was initially conducted in 2016. So the aim is to go back to the healthcare providers and see if there's been any change, if they have been able to introduce the strategies which were discussed in the initial, sorry, is it bothering you? Right, and understand whether they've been able to implement some of the strategies which were introduced or that they discussed in the initial phase of the research. Just providing an overview of the study. ILM, as Zora has already discussed, is an ongoing initiative in the division to better understand and engage men in HIV care services. And because existing research has proven that it is men who have poor performance in HIV care. So we are trying to understand what it is that can be done to better engage men in care. And although there's been a lot of research in terms of how individuals in the community, basically there's been a lot of research on the lived experiences of HIV positive individuals, but there hasn't been a lot of research on the lived experiences of healthcare providers in engaging men in care and what that experience is in terms of trying to ensure that men are not falling out of care. So this study tries to investigate the perspectives of healthcare providers and, as already mentioned, what can be done to ensure that men stay and are retained in care. And just an overview of the questions. Those are the three main questions of the study. And in terms of methods, there have been 25 interviews that were conducted with healthcare providers, and 10 interviews are of all the healthcare providers which were interviewed in 2016, and 15 on new healthcare providers. So we're trying to track the experiences of the providers interviewed in the initial phase of the study and the experiences of new healthcare providers which have been included in the study. And they include counselors, doctors, facility managers, nurses, and program coordinators, as well as healthcare promoters. The interviews are to understand their experiences. We're using an inductive paradigm to understand the experience of healthcare providers. In terms of the preliminary findings that we found, so this is just an overview of what we've been able to analyze from existing research and the new interviews that have been conducted, and they are as follows, and I'm going to be quick for time constraints. Sure. So HCP views on men's engagement in HIV care mainly were that there is a gap in men's involvement in HIV care. So the findings which were initial in 2016 still seem to be the main issue, that men are falling out of care. And this could be, and what HCPs did say maybe is that this is not only specific or special to the issue of HIV. It's generally an issue with men, and this could be attributed to ideas around masculinity and men not wanting to appear or seem weak by seeking care, and they usually seek care at a later stage when their health is failing and they need rigorous attention, as opposed to seeking care early on and being retained in the HIV cascade. And in terms of the gendered nature of accessing HIV care, there were mainly two findings. Some healthcare providers found that yes, it's men who fall out of care as opposed to women who usually perform very well in healthcare treatment. But other healthcare providers felt that it had nothing to do with gender, that it had something to do with the individual. And these reasons could be in terms of just the individual themselves, social factors, employment status, and health services and systems as well. Okay, sure. And in terms of the individual, as already mentioned, it could be ideas around masculinity and hegemonic masculinity specifically, and social factors include the stigma of HIV. The stigma of HIV is a huge factor when it comes to men delaying and accessing care and not wanting to be seen outside HIV rooms or TB rooms. A healthcare provider shared an experience of a teacher who he was treating, who explained that he fears going to the clinic because he doesn't want to be seen by the parents of the pupils that he teaches. So that's just an example of some of the reasons. And in terms of employment status, employment status, whilst a lot of unemployed people may have more time and opportunity to engage in care, but this exposes them to a lot of risks because of time and not being employed. They could be involved in substance abuse, and employed men, although may want to be engaged in care, are restrained by time in terms of employers not being able to understand that they need to take time to go to the clinic and access care. And okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah, it's hard to stick to 4 minutes. Now introducing my colleague, Dr. Kalon Idris, who is going to present on some preliminary findings from the Omoyo Moile project.
Yeah. Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Idris Kalon. Initially, I thought I had 6 minutes, but I think it's going to drop down to 2. All right. Okay, I'm involved in a project in the Division of Social and Behavioral Sciences, TB project. I'm going to explore challenges to TB infection prevention and control in clinics in the Western Cape of KwaZulu-Natal. But my presentation is going to focus on the Western Cape. I'm involved in research question 3 and 4 of this project. It's quite a huge project. We have a lot of researchers involved. London School of Hygiene, Topical Medicine and Hygiene, Topical Medicine, we all get it right. We have Queen Margaret's University also in the UK, University of KZN and UCT, which I'm involved in. Chris is actually leading in RQ1. We're looking at the policy component, emerging policies on IPC. We have research question 2, which is an estimation of how VRTB actually transmission is happening in facilities. Research question 3 and 4 are what I'm involved in, an estimation of how IPC plays out in the design and working practices in clinics. Research question 4, we're looking at healthcare workers' ideas of responsibility of risk and for IPC, risk and responsibilities of IPC, and that fits in a whole systems approach that we're looking at the infrastructure, we're looking at notions of risk and practices. So it's like hardware and software of IPC, if that makes sense. Then we have models, 2 models. I'm not even going to go there because the experts are actually working on that one, but I just decided to give a snapshot of what the research questions are. But at the end of the day, we're going to have a mathematical modeling and also an economic modeling as an output as well. So this is just initial impressions. We have collected data, and analysis is ongoing. So this is just basically a snapshot of some of the things that really stand out from our work in 6 clinics in the Western Cape, local and provincial clinics. There's the challenges in the interplay between administrative, environmental, and personal protection at the clinics, and that plays out in infrastructure of TB care, and as I said, the hardware and the software. We have seen that there is disparity in age, size, location, and resources in the various clinics. We are looking at urban and rural clinics. There are smaller and larger clinics. Ventilation plays a role in some of the larger clinics. However, what we also see under infrastructure of TB care are a similar organization of TB care. So the first thing I want us to understand is that irrespective of the size, irrespective of the location and resources, we've seen some similar patterns in the practices in the clinics. There's appointment systems for patient and staff comfortability and convenience. That means there are certain patients that come for a particular kind of service, particular time. But if they say, for instance, come 7 o'clock, they will give that same time to about 50 patients. So in as much as they come at 7 o'clock, they are not going to be seen at 7 o'clock. So that patient you want, let's say for instance, an hour or 2 hour service, that patient will have to wait for about 6, 7 hours, 8 hours for that particular service. So you say the appointment system can work, but it doesn't actually work well. So we have also ineffective TB screening. That's something that also jumps at us in all of the clinics. We also see a culture of care, and under culture of care we see low supervision, We have evidence of task shifting, poor clinical audits, delay in retrieving files. I mean, you want to spend a lot of time treating the patients than looking for the files of the patients, right? So another culture of care that we see, personal protection that is shaped by organizational culture, shaped by organizational culture and agency. What do I mean? Organizational culture, if you're telling patients to actually use their surgical mask and you are not using your N95 mask, it's problematic. Okay, that's just one example. And agency, some people say, I wear my N95 mask because I have experience of somebody that was infected with TB and died. So in other words, it's my agency to use the mask. So these two things actually play out in the clinics. And what we are saying right now, if we were to put a crude argument, is that infection control is being compromised based on the practices that are happening in these clinics, irrespective of size, location, and resources. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Idris. Nice and speedy there. Hopefully our esteemed third floor colleagues don't mind if we go a couple of minutes into their slot, because you've got two. It's fine. If we take 3 or 4 minutes of your slot for questions. Thanks. So now I'm introducing one of my other colleagues, Naflas Kwebu, who works with various of our community-based initiatives primarily, and she's presenting on her master's research.
Hi everyone, my name is Nafla as mentioned, and today I'm presenting on my master's thesis, which looked at the perspective and experiences of caregivers who are involved in a pediatric HIV disclosure program in Kailicha. As children transition to adolescence, caregivers are expected to initiate pediatric HIV disclosure. However, they usually delay, and that's due to various barriers that they face, such as perceived lack of disclosure skills. However, in response to that, MSF designed and implemented a caregiver-led HIV disclosure program that aimed to empower caregivers with the knowledge and skills that they need to initiate any disclosure. In doing so, caregivers were given 2 disclosure booklets, which covered partial and full disclosure. I had 8 participants, and I collected data through semi-structured interviews as well as participant observations over a period of 7 months. And here are some of my results. As indicated, caregivers were given disclosure booklets. However, 3 of the caregivers indicated that they had not read the books at the time of the interview, and those were 2 foster mothers. However, because the disclosure booklets were handed over by the pediatric HIV doctor at the clinic, they had some basic knowledge of disclosure, and they were able to talk about that. However, when I asked them to read a page or 2 from the booklet, they indicated that the books were accessible and they had no difficulty in reading them. At the time of the interview, some of the caregivers indicated that they had started disclosure due to the program, and they indicated that they did so because they feared that in the future their children might face adherence issues, so they might refuse to take their treatment. Caregivers linked disclosure to better adherence, and that was actually driven by some of their discussions with healthcare workers. So when healthcare workers handed over the disclosure books, they were saying things like, you need to disclose so that you won't face future adherence issues, and so because of that, they felt the need to actually start disclosure. So this was a powerful motivator, but at the same time it had some unintended consequences, such as enforcing one's own disclosure as opposed to the process-oriented disclosure thing that the WHO advocates for. And then besides fear of non-adherence, caregivers indicated that they also rate their children for signs of readiness. So they focused on a child's age as well as maturity. So children between the ages of 10 to 15 years old were thought to be ready for disclosure, but then younger kids also got disclosed to. And for those, parents focused on maturity, so a child's curiosity and also their intellect. Despite caregivers' fear, which acted as a trigger for disclosure, as well as reading children for readiness, caregivers still struggle to initiate disclosure. And that's because, and this is like particularly like the biological caregivers, they had the fear of being blamed for passing on the virus to the child, and also like had worries about the child's psychological well-being after disclosure. However, for those caregivers who actually disclosed, they indicated that they were met by silence, which was both a blessing and a curse. It was a blessing because they didn't have to like be confronted with difficult questions such as, how did I come to be infected? Because in order to answer that, the caregivers felt that they would have to then talk about sex. And there were like cultural taboos around talking about sex with young children. And then it was a curse because they couldn't like assess whether the children understood what was happening or how they felt about HIV. And then to conclude, in a context where there are cultural taboos around sex, we need to understand that certain conversations are hard, and we need to find ways to encourage parents to have those conversations. And then also we need to recognize the importance of healthcare workers in the disclosure process. Caregivers really value their opinions. And also we need to emphasize that disclosure is more than a daring. So we need to like be creative in how we communicate the philosophy of disclosure. Thanks.
Well, okay, so we're just going to take 5 more minutes for any questions. Does anybody have any questions for any of the presenters? Yes?
Yeah, can I ask on the presentation on infection prevention and control?
Yes.
So one, you mentioned there was some modeling done, but one of the key factors in infection transmission in health facilities is that typically health facilities get a large mass of patients coming in the morning.
Yeah.
And then they sit there most of the day waiting to be seen.
Yeah.
And of course that affords an opportunity to be infected.
Yeah.
So what effect is the waiting time? Did you look at the effect of the waiting time on infection?
Yes, actually I didn't comment on all of these pieces of research that are happening. That's one of the areas that we're looking at. Patient waiting time survey is ongoing. We haven't actually analyzed the data, but as I said, what we have seen so far, because we've had meetings where all of us come with our presentations and findings, but you know, it's one of the interventions that we are actually looking at. So how can we actually make some patients come at a later time when they know that staff are actually ready to roll those services out? Because it really doesn't make sense for a patient to come in the morning, as I even mentioned on the appointment systems, to wait so long for a service that can actually be rendered in an hour or two. But you know, we know the staff issue in clinics and even generally health settings in South Africa today. So but yes, it's one area that we are looking at, to answer your question. Yeah.
Sorry, you're going to have to shout. Oh, sorry, Leslie, you go first.
My question was to Dr. Kilone as well.
Yes.
You mentioned there's ineffective screening happening
in
our clinics. I just wanted to find out, are you referring to constitutional symptom screening questionnaires or sputum screening as a means of screening? And what is your view in terms of how we can improve upon either one?
Yeah, the screening that I'm looking at here, we actually spoke about because we are not the clinical people, right? We are the, how should I say, social scientists. Okay, so we're looking at the not necessarily the clinical tools, but the practices. So you can have the paraphernalia to do the screening, but the processes, the managerial processes that actually accompany those tools, or rather say make those tools what they should be, is ineffective. That's what I'm referring to. Is that clear? So it's the clinical screening audits, basically, that are ineffective.
It's really a comment because this is such a interdisciplinary area.
Yes, it is.
There are at least 3 divisions in the school. We're doing some work on this area from a different perspective, and I wonder if you could comment on how other perspectives, like occupational medicine, mental health, health systems, everybody's talking about different ways of looking at the same problem.
Yeah.
And what would it add to your research to kind of have a conversation about it?
Yeah, I think it's, I'll take that. I don't really have much to say about it now, but I'll note it. Will that be sufficient for you, sir? It's an easy way to get out of it. Of course, yeah. Yes, it is a whole systems approach. So we are actually incorporating the hard software and hard and software of IPC. So there are researchers who are actually in that area, the hard sciences. They also complement what we do, and we complement what they do. So we do have those conversations within the methods that we are actually employing, or we have employed. Whole systems approach. And there's if you go to my slide, I think the second page, there's a link there. You can actually go how we network with various other people on IPC. Yes.
So just a general comment for all the presenters is just from a health system perspective. I'm hearing a lot of description of what the challenges and the problems are. And the health system itself is challenged. It's got resource constraints. It is trying to deal with a number of issues that are ahead. So I think what the health system would want are what are the solutions, and how can researchers help us find solutions in the context of resource constraints and issues and multiple crises. So I think I want to hear more from the presenters of just insight into the challenges, but also how they can help find solutions to some of the challenges that they are pointing out. To a certain extent, they are real.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. I think there's a number of things going on. One is that, of course, 4 minutes is never enough to describe even the beginning of a research project, really. Another thing is that some of the work described is either, or in fact, a lot of the work described is either preliminary or sort of early postgraduate studies. So that's also part of the aspect. But another thing to say, I think, is that, I take your point completely that a lot of these issues have come up before. I think a lot of the work that social behavioral sciences tries to do in these spaces is exploratory. It is kind of identifying and surfacing some of those issues, and we sometimes struggle more to come up with solutions. Sometimes we come up with possible solutions and they're disregarded based on those resource issues, etc. But I think one thing that Idris's presentation points to, which is really interesting, is that it's not always about a resource constraint. Sometimes it is about how something is organized or how something is thought about. So I think the more comprehensive findings of that study will hopefully speak to some of what you're asking about. Thanks. I think we have to stop so we don't get too much into everyone else's time, but yeah, thanks. Oh yeah, I know, but invite the first presenter up. So I am also chairing the second session, which is, as I said, our third floor colleagues, Women's Health Research Unit. And the first speaker is Debbie Constant, speaking on immediate versus delayed provision of IUC after second trimester medical abortion. No easy answers. It's all. Don't say this. 10, I think 10. It's going to have to be 10. Sorry. But there we go.
Good morning, everybody. So this research day, Women's Health Research, will be talking about some of our ongoing research and about some of our work that is soon to be started, innovative work. Our students are all away currently, so we're going to talk in depth about some of these studies which are done in collaboration with the Western Cape Department of Health, with the Department of Energy at Prodiskier, and with other collaborators in Sweden and in the US. So South Africa has a high unplanned pregnancy rate, around 65%, contraceptive need of 58%, and most women accessing public sector services use the injectable contraceptive methods, and discontinuation is very common for these methods. In addition, in South Africa, approximately 25% of abortions that are performed are in the second trimester, which is higher than in many other settings. that have similar liberal policies, where the rate is closer to 10% and declining in some of these settings. And while abortion in the second trimester is a safe procedure when done under safe conditions with a trained provider, it does carry a disproportionate amount of risk compared to procedures that are done in the earlier gestational age. And providers are scarce and facilities are scarce. So we have a vicious cycle here. Unplanned pregnancy is stigmatized, associated with silence, there's lack of access to facilities, and a culture that is not supportive of reproductive rights. There are delays, which result in women seeking abortion later. Second trimester abortion is even more stigmatized than ever, harder to access facilities. And post-procedure women are commonly provided with the same contraceptive that failed in the first place, the injectable methods, followed by discontinuation and round. So there's obviously a case for promoting the use of long-acting reversible methods, particularly post-abortion. And the question is, what is the best timing? What is the best timing to provide a intrauterine device after an abortion procedure? And what do we know? It's mostly a balance between the likelihood of expulsion versus the likelihood of non-uptake. So expulsion, if the device is provided and inserted immediately post-procedure, and non-uptake if the woman is given a follow-up appointment to go some weeks later when everything is settled for her IUD. So what do we know? That after first trimester medical abortion, around about 4 to 7 days, expulsion rates are 4 to 12%. That's when assessed at 3 months. Immediately after second trimester medical surgical abortion, D&E, expulsion rates around 7%. And immediately after second trimester medical abortion, recent study reported expulsion rates around 18.5%. But I just want you to take note that this particular study, which is the only other one besides ours, the median gestational age of women was 16 weeks with a range of 15 to 17. So what happens when women are referred to come to a follow-up appointment to get their IUD some weeks after? Well, in comparison, when they were referred to come back to the abortion facility 3 to 6 weeks after D&E, that's the second trimester surgical procedure, 54% did not arrive. And when they were in another study, referred to come back to their local CHC within 4 weeks after first trimester MA, 76 did not arrive, which is clearly a worse situation. So hence our study, very exciting, was to determine the immediate versus delayed insertion of a copper IUD following second trimester medical abortion. And this was a 2-arm randomized controlled trial involving 110 women undergoing second trimester medical abortion critical care. And just what is important and what is special about this study is that within the Western Cape and at Trudiscare, which is one of the 2 facilities that provide second trimester medical abortion in Western Cape, gestational age is between 17 weeks 6 days and 19 weeks 5 days, so much later than the previous reporter. So our 2 arms were the immediate arm, where the IUD was inserted prior to discharge within 24 hours post-abortion, and the delayed group were referred to their local CHC to attend 3 weeks after discharge. And they were provided with 1 month's worth of oral contraceptives for contraceptive coverage during that time. So, how are we doing? Good. So we received HRIC approval for the study in April 2018, and we started recruitment in August 2018. Just to give you a sense of how the study worked, women were recruited on the so-called day 0 in gynae OPD up at Trudiscare, and they are admitted for their procedure within a week, and at that point, a randomization took place. Randomization into either the immediate or the delayed group, and study point 2 was involved a clinical examination and interview at 6 weeks post-procedure, post the abortion procedure, again at Curtis Care, OPD. Then study points 3 and 4 with telephone interviews at 3 and 6 months respectively. So self-report. And our outcomes were use of the IUD at 6 weeks, 3 and 6 months, expulsion rates, bleeding patterns, new pregnancies, and acceptability. Right, so where are we at this point? We've concluded recruitment, and we enrolled 122 patients, of whom 5 did not arrive for their procedures, so we randomized 117. 3 of those were excluded as they formed part of a pilot phase, resulting in 57 in each of our 2 groups. In the immediate group, 4 discontinued. They asked to be discontinued from the study, no longer interested in participating, so we ended up with 53 and 57 in the 2 groups respectively. And we have concluded our 6-week follow-up point with 87 and 86% follow-up, which we're immensely pleased about. And then 3 months, we're nearly completed. We're at 75, 77%. 6 months is still ongoing, and we'll finish early January next year. But really, what I want to do today is just bring, hopefully, to your attention, hopefully things that are of use, because it has been extremely challenging. And the first challenge that we encountered was that it was gently suggested that it might be a good idea to get SAPRA approval, as this could be seen as a phase 4 trial. So we followed this advice, and we understood that this would take approximately 6 weeks. Well, we still haven't heard from SAPRA. So we were then advised, thankfully, that we could engage with the HREC around this. And HREC were very helpful. They had given permission for the study to proceed, and they overruled the SAPRA application and said, right, you can get going. So we started the next day, which was August. Then some of the more sort of operational difficulties is that TOP takes all day. Second trimester TOP takes all day. Women come in the morning and they start with the medication, and the procedure finishes at some stage in the afternoon, and then they need to stabilize. So discharge happens either later, towards the end of the day or the evening, or early the next morning as they clear the ward for the next intake. So no doctors are available to insert the IUD. And interestingly, this is the same problem that they encountered in that other study I mentioned. No doctors around, or not available, or terribly busy doing something else. So we have a study doctor, Dr. Enda here, but we wanted to embed this in a kind of standard care setup. So we used a WhatsApp group to notify the doctors that there was a case waiting, and to ensure that the doctor was there to provide the IUD, which was fairly successful, although it didn't always work. Then registrars rotate out of the ward, so we had to do repeated orientation and training of registrars, and in between these successive waves, sometimes things went a little bit off the rails. Then we needed to do a 6-week string check in gynae OPD, which was absolutely impossible to organize within the sort of current standard care setup. So Margaret provided the 6-week string check. We did organize occasionally to involve medical officers, but that was not an easy thing to do. And if you embedded this whole practice where a string check is done there, one would have to involve the hospital systems quite extensively. Then in terms of the nurse providers at CHCs, because the IUD seldom use nurse providers who are certified competent, have lost their skills often. So we needed to do refresher training, which is both practical and practical using models, mannequins, and theoretical. Then IUD providers are often abortion care providers. They're not family planning nurses. So this involved, scheduling as to where to go, when to go, how to find them, and then communication with the provider themselves to try and draw the patients and the providers together satisfactorily. Then there was participant lost follow-up at 6 weeks, which was the first encounter after insertion for the immediate group, 3 months and 6 months. We used monthly reminders. This is after the 6-week period, between 6 weeks and 6 months, so we didn't interfere with the delayed group. We did active tracing, SOPs for contact to ensure there was no bias between groups. And then finally, really importantly, is that those who are still lost to follow up, we added a clause in the protocol and in the consent granting us access to electronic medical records. And my point here is that we were then able to see if participants had access to healthcare, and out of this we accessed the folders, and we have picked up repeat pregnancies in the delayed group that we wouldn't know of otherwise. So you can't assume that people lost follow-up at all as well. It's not necessarily the case, certainly in this study. So, do a process evaluation, that's my recommendation. You want to capture all of this and instead of just reporting in the usual sort of format we do for a clinical trial, do it and do it in time while the trial is still running, and it'll address the kinds of questions as how the fidelity of the trial processes, was it implemented as planned, what might have influenced the outcomes, and what are the contextual factors. We're busy with our process evaluation, which involves a review of study procedures and in-depth interviews with doctors, nurses, and participants. So, thank you. So we have to bring you results. We can't yet, but those are coming soon.
Thanks, Debbie. I'm going to move straight on, and Margit can introduce herself. So
oh. I only 8 minutes. That's going to be hard.
If it's 2 sets of 15, then there's no time for questions. So that's fine. Just go to the
all right. I'll try and be speedy. All right. 30. Hello, everyone. My name is Margit Endler, and I'm a colleague of Debbie's at the Women's Health Research Unit. I'm also a gynecologist and obstetrician from Sweden, so my normal life is on the clinician. But for the past 2 years, I've been a researcher here. I'm also a researcher at Karolinska Institutet in Stockholm. And apart from this study, I'm going to speak to you a little bit about what my research is focused on during these past 2 years, which is telemedicine, and which is an option to circumvent the restrictions that we know exist to abortion care in settings such as ours. So on the topic of telemedicine for medical abortion, how safe, effective, and acceptable is it? So what is telemedicine, first of all? So this is the WHO definition. The delivery of healthcare services where distance is a critical factor by healthcare professionals using information and communications technologies for the exchange of valid information for diagnosis, treatment, and prevention of disease and injuries. So the typical convoluted definition. Some define it just as the delivery of healthcare services by information communications technologies. And there's quite a large difference there. Just keep that difficulty of definition in mind. So I thought I'd first just present you with a clinic, a telemedicine clinic, so you know sort of how it works. They all work differently. This is Women on Web, which is one of the largest telemedicine clinics for abortion. So they've existed for 15 years, and they've provided abortion pills to about 80,000 women around the world. This is their site, just to give you an example. So women will access this, they click on that, I need an abortion, and then she fills in an online questionnaire. I'm just giving you a little, yes, yes, I need an abortion. You take a pregnancy test, yes, ultrasound, no. And then there's information she can follow up on. And then the questionnaire helps her assess how far along she is in the pregnancy. And then they go through a sort of eligibility screening. Is she eligible to take this medication? Then there's different ways to provide medication. Some services will write a prescription and leave it at the pharmacy, and the women will pick it up there. In other countries, women have to fix this on their own, so get mice over the counter or under the counter in other settings. Women on Web send the medication. I post the woman's home address, and then they email the instructions, so they don't go together. So there's, it doesn't specifically say what she's going to use the medication for. Importantly, Women on Web, it's a global service, but they mostly service markets which are sort of middle to high income. Poland is a huge market, Ireland, Brazil. So it's in a context of an existing, well-established and working healthcare infrastructure. So what's the premise of medical abortion by telemedicine? Well, the first one, of course, is there are still huge barriers to access safe abortion, which still results in maternal deaths from abortion, which is otherwise an extremely safe procedure. It's been established that women can do medical abortion at home, up to 10 weeks, 9 weeks in South Africa, but it's going to be extended. And then this huge expansion of mobile technology, which allows for an increased autonomy for women. So we'll see how far I get, but what I was going to do was present 3 studies that I've done during the past 2 years, which looked at this topic at sort of different scopes. The first one, the narrow scope, was among women who use this Women on Web service, data from that clinic. And the second study was sort of a global perspective of a systematic review of how telemedicine is used in the world, in published science. And the third one was an even wider scope, and just looking at how women use online services and all the internet to access abortion pills and information. So telemedicine, given this diffuse definition, may be somewhere here. So these were the studies. This was a Polish study, and then we have the systematic review, and then that was the review of the online use. I'm going to quickly just go through the outcomes that all these studies look at, because these outcomes will recur, and they're also part of core outcomes that are being formulated for medical abortion. It's important to standardize things so that we know what we measure. So one is the success rate or effectiveness. How many of these abortions became complete? Then there's safety outcomes, so outcomes that measure if there was any risk to the woman's life or health. And then acceptability, how acceptable was it to women? And third of all, utilization, so how do women use this and how often do they use these services? So study one. This was a Polish study from Women on Web data. So what I was interested in here was, does it matter what week you are? How does that affect the outcomes if you're below or above 9 weeks? Which was the then limit for home abortion. So this was initially 1,220 women. 35% were lost to follow-up. So in the end, we could analyze 615 women. So again, I looked at all these outcomes: success rate, safety, and acceptability at below 9 weeks and above 9 weeks to see if there was any difference. Sorry for this table, but here to the left, you can see these outcomes again. So, the safety outcomes, so emergency hospital visits, heavy bleeding, all this is self-reported. And then we have the success rate and acceptability outcomes, surgical intervention after abortion, any other treatment for incomplete abortion, continuing pregnancy, and dissatisfaction. So here the risk, the odds ratio is adjusted to the right. So that the main risk associated with being over 9 weeks was that women went to hospital much more often immediately, so quite soon after they took the tablet, for some reason, for a complaint. So it was almost a 4 times increased risk. Heavy bleeding wasn't significantly, so they didn't report more bleeding. There was also more surgical intervention and more treatments overall. But the rate of dissatisfaction was the same, and satisfaction for that matter. So they were equally happy, those at a later gestational age and earlier. And here I just stratified by gestational age. You can see there's a trend here that if you have 3% increased risk between 9-10 weeks, between 11 and 14 weeks, you have more than 9 times increased odds of going to the hospital for an emergency visit. So in conclusion, we saw that medical abortion by telemedicine at over 9 gestational weeks was associated with a higher rate of hospital visits and a higher rate of treatment and interventions, but not with a higher risk of complaints such as pain and bleeding, and with an equal rate of satisfaction. So these results are a little bit difficult to interpret. But for some reason, these women who were at a higher gestational age at least perceived the need to go to hospital. So that's important to absorb and adapt the service. So this was the second study where we looked at all telemedicine services that have published clinical outcomes. And this was a systematic review, so we started with 1,400 records, and then it sort of wheeled down to only 13 studies that presented clinical outcomes after from their services. So this is a collation of all the results, all these 13 studies. So below 10 weeks, we have over 15,000 women in total. And in that row, you see the range of outcomes, the studies. So I haven't done anything with the data, I just say it's just the range. So blood transfusion in these studies was between 0 and 0.7%, hospital admission 0.07 to 2.8, continuing pregnancy 0 to 1.9, surgical intervention was a high range, 0.9 to 19, complete abortion in the 90s, and antibiotic use was below 3%. So none of these studies had any comparison groups, or almost none had. But what I can say is that this is very comparable to what you see in standard care. This is about, except for the surgical intervention. That's 20% is, 90% is high, but otherwise it's quite similar. And this was the acceptability, which was, so the rate they would recommend, the dissatisfaction, satisfaction, also high satisfaction with these services. So we concluded that medical abortion through telemedicine is highly acceptable to women, and we see similar rates of clinical outcomes to standard care, but higher surgical evacuation rates, which can depend on just the local context. Some countries are more likely to perform a vacuum aspiration. But there's some very serious limitations to this data. All the studies have methodological limitations. It was mostly descriptive studies, so there was no control trials, there was hardly any observational trials, in fact. It was self-reported data, so with high loss to follow up. Telemed represents very different services. There are services that provide very high resource care and services that operate completely outside the formal healthcare system. So we need, and there's no studies from low resource countries or settings. Okay, so this was the review of online services overall. So the first thing I saw was that the interest in this topic has increased over time, a lot. So they started coming around in the early 2000s, and then a few studies sort of petered out, and then the interest has been increasing. Let me just skip ahead, I think, if there's that way. From these services that women access online unidirectionally, where they just access information and there may be a provider unclear qualifications there, we don't really have any clinical outcome data. But these are the conclusions we made overall on how women access. First of all, this is something that's increasing. It's already beyond where our research is. Women are already using these services, and research needs to catch up to investigate how it's being used and what the consequences are. If the service is led by healthcare providers who are trained, outcomes seem to be similar. And women, even in contexts where they have access to abortion, such as the US, report a number of benefits and sometimes a preference for online services because it's more autonomous and it's more private. Women also report an enormous amount of distress in this jungle that is the internet, in finding a trusted provider and trusted information, because it very much goes from high to low, and the safety depends very much on what she needs out there. So, just shortly about this, our next study, which is we hope to start in January 2020 from the Women's Health Research Unit. And this is, here we're trying to meet up what we find is lacking in this field. So we're going to do a randomized controlled trial that investigates medical abortion through telemedicine with standard care. And it's a non-inferiority trial, so we want to show that this is an equivalent model of abortion care. So this will take place at 4 public health clinics in the Western Cape, and we're going to randomize 780 women to either telemedicine or standard care, and then look at the effectiveness, safety, and acceptability of telemedicine abortion. Thank you.
Just if there's anyone with the burning 1 or 2 questions, quickly, possible.
Yeah, presentation. Very interesting information. So if you measure litigation risk, I suppose one of the things I have in mind is obviously clinical risk with someone remotely providing healthcare. I don't know what your thoughts are about it or out of the work that you've done. Any concerns about how that gets managed? Providing care remotely where someone doesn't examine patient. This is a question that would come up. And
Yes, for sure.
Additional consultation involves a history, examination, etc., before providing a prescription.
Yes.
As opposed to doing it remotely, there is obviously no physical examination.
Yeah. Thank you. I sort of speeded past this study. That is my concern with telemedicine, and it's not addressed, and I have difficulty answering how safe it is because of the high loss to follow up. And this is why I want to do this study. So our study will be controlled in more ways than one. So first of all, it will be an online consultation eligibility screening, but I will be the doctor behind the scenes. So we will use Women on Web, but I will have access to their back office. So there will be a South African doctor. We will also have a simplified physical exam, because I do think women should see a provider before the abortion. I hope that an ultrasound isn't necessary. So that's one of the key points this study wants to look at. So this telemedicine arm will involve a physical exam, but it will be simplified. It won't include an ultrasound. So this adheres to the Western Cape guidelines, which say that an ultrasound isn't necessary. But it has become standard of care, which is actually to the detriment of many women, perhaps not here, but definitely the rest of South Africa and Africa, that this will actually delay an abortion because there is no ultrasound provider. And sometimes this will result in the abortion not occurring at all. So before it's too late, I want to show that what the WHO says, a palpation of the uterus and an assessment of the last menstrual period is enough to safely do an abortion. But as a clinician, I think this exam should be done. So I want to test that. And this model is also a proxy for women in countries where abortion is completely illegal. So the idea that a woman can go to a clinic and say, I'm pregnant, I don't know how far I am, and then the nurse will help her and to see that everything is on your 7 weeks, and then she can take that information to an online provider. So women are they're quite rigorous. They recommend women to have an ultrasound wherever they are, or at least an exam.
I might have missed it, but maybe it's quite early about loss of follow-up and what happens. So you can use the provincial data set that will
Yes. So first of all, the follow-up is we're going to do a follow-up for 3 days. One of the outcomes is adherence to the regimen. So describe to me how you took the pills. Then there's a follow-up at 6 weeks to look at all these outcomes. But for those that we don't reach, we will access medical records in the same way to see what interventions.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to close with apologies. The next session, I knocked on at the beginning, will have effects. Hopefully we can catch up during the team. Thanks everyone, and can I welcome everyone from Environmental and Occupational Health. I'm not sure who's first.
So welcome Akil, thanks.
Good morning, everybody. I'm a pleasure in first of all presenting the research of the Center of Environmental Occupational Health Research Center, the Environmental Division and the Occupational Medicine Division. The first is I'll give an overview of the research, and then this presentation, so I won't waste time. It's quite a busy program, so I'll start off with the first presentation. Unfortunately, it's not the updated file, so I did ask each researcher to provide the input, and one or two presentations hasn't been updated. So unfortunately, it's not the updated presentation. So first of all, the center, about the different units, has got quite a wide variety of research activities, including occupational environmental allergens and dermatitis, pesticide endocrine disruptions, quite a big area as well, mining, metals, public health issues, occupational environmental health research, climate change, and quite a recent emerging area in the division, and noise and image exposure to collaboration, where this tropical institute has also become a research area of interest. So I'll start off with my own research program. I'll ask each person in the center to provide an overview of the research. So basically, I'm basically research chair in global environmental health with Martin Risley from the Swiss Tropical Health Institute. And we've basically got four major areas that we focus on, and the one is air pollution and health. Here, the big study is a cohort study of effects of air pollution on asthma outcomes. Basically, the Toyo Polinion did it for his PhD, and there's a lot of few sub-studies also associated with studies. The listed study on noise exposure also is part of that study. So the research chair is coming to an end. The first cycle is coming to an end this year. So there's a new cycle starting in the next 5 years. So one of the main studies for that new cycle is the time series analysis of PM10 and periodic modeling with hospital admissions and asthma attacks during the period of 2010 to 2017. Then the second project is focused on endocrine disruption, pesticide and health. So here the big study is a cohort study which started in 2017 with a baseline, and the follow-up is to have been done this year, focusing on also reproductive and neurodevelopment effects in the Western Cape among school children. But there's various sub-studies also associated with this project. There's a listed study looking at digital media, cellular phone usage, and the same health effects. And then there's also other studies on, as part of the core study, is environmental monitoring of pesticides, study done over a year to look at the environmental contamination of pesticides in the study areas of the pesticide project. There's also other studies. There's one on relation between the exposure to the measurements of organophosphate, the exposure, and reproductive health among birds as well. And then there's also a project on focus on water and health. So Stuart has mentioned that we have a collaboration with the Future Water Institute, and we've got some projects under that topic as well. The main areas that focused on in the first cycle was looking at water pollution, hygiene, and diarrhea in the Western Cape. In the lower catchment area, the Future Water Institute have done some studies, but there's some other studies also in the new cycle that we will focus in other areas in the Western Cape, also in the Limpopo province through collaboration with the University of Windsor as well. And then climate change and health is the fourth project. Basically, there's a current study looking at climate change and diarrhea in the Western Cape. Also, another study that's coming in the new cycle is the relation between climate change and cardiopulmonary effects in South Africa and in India. And there's also some ongoing project on heat stress and occupational health as well. So that gives an overview of the chair global environmental health. And then there's the list is for the program of Mohammed Jibe, allergens and asthma disease focus. There's one project looking at workplace allergens and asthma. So there's been various studies looking at poultry farms, spice mills, vineyards, and bakers, and its current focus is looking at wood workers in Mozambique. Project 2 is looking at health and well-being of Tanzanian agricultural workers, and basically looking at work in the climate change, vulnerabilities in seaweed and harvesting and in fish farming. There's another project looking at work-related asthma due to cleaning agent in health workers, which was the PhD project of Hussein Manwa, and that's also in process of being analyzed as well. The next is a research program currently earlier. He's got two focus areas, one on occupational health in minors and occupational tuberculosis in health. So he's got quite a number of projects listed under those topics. The project one looking at artificial intelligence in screening for TB. Project two looking at prevalence of active TB and prevalence of TB in post-TB mobility in former gold miners. A project looking at relation between silicosis and TB, etiology, nomenclature, and one looking at mapping of artisanal mining in Mozambique. The one on health workers focused on developing intervention to improve TB infection, one on legal and governments and analysis of prevention and management of TB in health workers in Mozambique, and one on the policy system analysis of screening for and treatment of latent TB in health workers in South Africa. Then Leslie London also got, apart from the work that he does in public health medicine, he still has some environmental projects as well. The one looking at neurodevelopment consequences of acute pesticide poisoning in children, one looking at toxic contaminant of cheap wine in the Western Cape, and one looking at suicide, long-term organophosphorus exposure and suicide risk. Sub-study also on genetic polymorphism and could be below that John to a personal presentation on some of the results found in that study. And then there's also a program on Shahida Adams, one looking at predictors of post-traumatic stress disorder among ambulance personnel in the Western Cape, obstructive lung disease and tobacco workers, also working on the projects to working artisanal gold mining and conference on mining in Mozambique. One on silica and TB in the silica exposed workers, and one development of a network of experts on health effects of mine dust. So Richard wasn't able to give the details of his research project, so I've just listed some of the areas that he has worked on. Western Cape provincial burden of disease projects that he's working on, alcohol and public health as well, and then upstream intervention to reduce interpersonal violence, including urban upgrading and alcohol policies, the areas that he is working on. And then Andy did send a slide, but unfortunately it couldn't be incorporated in the current, so this is not the updated, so I've just listed some areas that she's working on. So child exposure and flame retardants, doing highly hazardous pesticides in Zimbabwe, and characterizing the role of climate change in protecting Zimbabwean farm health risk from exposure to pesticides. Those are some of the things. We've got quite a few projects in the climate change and health projects and various other topics as well. And what she said was also that a lot of this research is then incorporated in the teaching programs and also the translational work as well. Okay, so that's a brief overview of the center's research. So I'll start off now with the first presentation, which I will go. Basically, this is a project titled The Effect of Ambient NO2 and PM2.5 exposure on the respiratory health of school children residing in informal settlements in the Western Cape. So it's basically one of the papers which Troy Bolerian has done for his PhD project. And basically in collaboration between a few South African institutions and the Swiss Tropical Health Institute in Switzerland as well. So the background to this project is that there's some evidence from international studies that air pollution, especially NO2 and PM exposure, causes doctor-diagnosed asthma, new cases of doctor-diagnosed asthma at exposure level which is above the current exposure limits. This inconclusive evidence that other pollutants, air pollutants, critical air pollutants, causes this asthma outcomes. And there's actually in the literature no evidence of individual effects of long-term air pollutants on, meaning that one pollutant wasn't controlled for the other pollutant. So the aim of the study was, the particular presentation is to investigate the long-term effects of NO2 and 2.5 exposure on asthma outcomes in the school children from 4 areas in the Western Cape. So Basically, we were able to recruit about 600 participants, grade 4 children from school, from 4 areas in the Western Cape, including Kalicha, Makona, Beam, and Osmond, which were prioritized by the Western Cape government as priority area in terms of air pollutants. So, could just add that the study was done in collaboration with the Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning, who provided a lot of the funding for the project. And then we included another project in the Norfolk area because of the low industrial activity in that area, and that was most significant. All 4 study areas were informal settlements. The follow-up period was over 12 months, starting 2015 to 2016. The exposure measurement included air pollution measurements involved in air monitoring campaign at the houses, selected houses of the participants, and taking the data from there to produce a land use regression modeling of exposure of the participants at each of the participants' houses in all the areas. The outcomes included a questionnaire outcomes on symptoms and symptom score, house characteristics, indoor exposure through questionnaire, as well as lung function testing for outcome, spirometry, and airway inflammation through 468 nitrogen oxide. And the study was approved by the University Ethics Committee. So this slide shows some pictures of some of the measurements in the field. This OLED doing some measurements, and the field workers doing both spirometry, exhaled nitrogen, and questionnaire measurements as well. This slide shows some of the baseline demographic data, baseline and follow-up. So we can see that there was some change in baseline and follow-up for the indoor exposures as well. This slide summarizes some of the baseline and follow-up data for the outcome measurements, and you can see that there is some changes from baseline to follow-up for the 600 participants as well. So this is a slide summarizes some of the air pollution data that was obtained. Shows the average PM2.5 concentration and NO2, which were both below the WHO guidelines. There were some people that have exceeded the WHO, but on average, the values were below the WHO guidelines. And it also shows some of the climatic factors, meteorological factors. So this slide shows some of the reported the incident of adverse outcomes during the 1-year follow-up period. So you can see that there were quite some incidents in various outcomes in terms of diagnosis, wheezing, asthma symptoms, and all outcomes. There were some incidents of adverse outcomes during the 1-year cohort period. This slide summarizes the multivariate association between the exposure from NO2 and PM2.5 and NO2. First thing, the single pollutant neutral, and then both, including both pollutants in the model, and adjusting for critical factors. So there was a significant association found between ocular nasal symptoms, wheezing, and asthma with air pollution exposure. The slide shows the association between these pollutants and the objective measures, which is the lung function test, spirometry, and exhaled nitrogen oxide. So in this study, there was a significant association between NO2 exposure and exhaled nitrogen oxide above 35 parts per billion. So in conclusion, the study, the main finding was that the independent effect of 12-month exposure to NO2 at exposure levels was actually below the WHO guidelines. On ocular nasal symptoms, wheezing, asthma symptoms score of 2, and also airway inflammation. There was no effect of PM2.5, and it seemed that in the literature, this is actually the first study we actually demonstrated the effect. We want an independent effect of NO2 controlling for peak exposure. So there were some of the typical limitations. First of all, the lack of daytime activity patterns in the study. However, there was similar patterns found in both in all the areas, so that was thought to be a big limitation. The use of monitoring station outside the study area for two of the areas to estimate exposures is a slight limitation, and the low spatial variability explained by the annual 2.5 model in the land use regression model. And of course, in the short follow-up period, it's only 1 year, and ideally we could have found we couldn't have a longer follow-up period. So the short follow-up is also a limitation in the study. So just some recommendation in terms of the results of the study, new housing, educational programs, awareness of asthma, mitigation of long-term effects of climate change, real-time information alerts, reducing personal exposure, improving air quality measurements as well in the city. Recommendations in terms of future research, longer follow-up periods, robust exposure assessment of ambient air pollutants. Let's show some of the field workers that participated in the study, which obviously some of you will recognize. And then we would like to acknowledge the funders of the study, also the steering committee by the Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning. Then the school children participated, all the participants in the study, and also the field workers. Okay, so that's basically that study. I don't know if this is, yeah, we wanted to questions. Okay, hi.
There's more comment than a question. Thanks very much. I think there's a lot of work being done right now on the life approach to childhood and how exposures in early childhood essentially has effects throughout the life progress into adulthood. I think the really interesting study that keeps out that area of work and the intersection between the environmental health exposure, children's health, and then the education and well-being. So is there any sense of
Sorry, again?
Is there any sense from the study as to whether if you have children in school, they experience the effects that they do experience from the exposures?
Yeah, basically it will, that's a good point. It probably are, the study showed, I might just add that these are probably preliminary results. It's basically for one of the few studies that looked at low levels of exposure, so it needs to be repeated to make sure that the funding is done. But the findings do indicate obviously that this low level exposure can affect children. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so the next presentation will be by David Goodman. She's busy with a project looking at the association between organophosphatic pesticide exposure and suicide. And she's going to post it, and this will be the presentation. Right, so we've got about 5 minutes for this presentation.
Morning. So the project that I'm presenting is a collaborative project between the School of Public Health, Division of Human Genetics, as well as the Forensic Medicine Department. But what I'm presenting today is the research question we wanted to answer is, we wanted to investigate the association between organophosphate pesticide exposure and attempted suicide using structural equation modeling. So we had 4 models that we hypothesized was in the causal pathway between organophosphates and suicide. The first 3 models were quite similar. We hypothesized that adults that were exposed to low-dose, long-term pesticide exposure from household and domestic use and garden use were at increased risk of depression or aggression or impulsivity. And then that in turn increases the risk of suicidal intent. And then for model 4, what we decided to do was put them all together. So we said that adults exposed to pesticides are at increased risk of depression, aggression, and impulsive behavior. In addition to that, that there was an interaction that occurs between the depression, aggression, and impulsivity. And that may in turn modify the risk of a suicide attempt. So the study was conducted, it was a hospital-based case control study. There were 400 patients with attempted suicide were our cases. And our controls were patients that came for any other condition. So I'm thinking, what I'm looking for. But it's, you know, oh dear. Anyway, elective, there we go, elective procedures. All right. So we measured pesticide use from the questionnaire data. So we wanted to know if they used household and garden pesticides, how frequent they used it, and the duration of use. And with regard to the behavioral measures, we had validated questionnaires to measure levels of depression, aggression, and impulsivity. And we used M+ software to calculate the models. So this is what we found. So I'm just going to quickly go over it for you. If you look at model 1, 2, and 3, if you look at the gray lines, that indicates no association. So it's very quick to see that there was no association between pesticide exposure and depression in model 1, or aggression in model 2, or in model 3 for impulsive behavior. But what we did find was that past poisoning of pesticides was associated with depression and aggression, but not impulsivity. And then for model 4, when we combined it all together, we saw that there was an association between past pesticides and depression. There was an interaction between depression and aggression, and that increased the risk of a suicide attempt. So to summarize, what we can say is that we found no association or relationship between household pesticide use and attempted suicide. However, past poisoning with pesticides played a role in attempted suicide, depression, and aggression, but not impulsivity. And that's the snapshot of the poster. I have all the model fit and pretty much things on there if you want to have a look at it upstairs. Thank you.
So, for conclusions, you said that, go back, that there was no relationship between domestic use and suicide with the past poisoning. So, would the past poisoning been from domestic use?
We don't think so. So, in our cohort, we had people that were also working as farm workers, and that's where we think where the past poisoning comes from.
To hear that was fabulous. I might have missed it, but presumably there were differences between your cases and controls other than their suicidality. Did you have a chance to adjust for those, and if so, what kinds of things?
So we adjusted, well, we didn't adjust for sex and age because they were matched for sex and age. What we did find, though, that was surprising is that we had a very high level of depression, even in our control groups, as well as impulsivity. So impulsivity was actually very similar, and I can't remember what else was.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, so the next one actually would be it's a presentation by Andrew House. I'm not sure whether the presentation is actually uploaded. Yeah, it doesn't seem to be.
So good morning, everyone. I'm Andrea Rother from the Division of Environmental Health. And we have been doing collaborations internationally looking at trying to get sustainable, environmental sustainable curriculum for medical professionals as well as environmental health, focusing on environmental health history taking. So I'm going to report just briefly on a study that was done recently to look at UCT students and to see what they thought about climate change and what they thought about an environmental sustainable curriculum. So just a bit as a background, that a quarter of the burden of disease that we are currently facing is coming from environmental factors, and that climate change has been shown in the research to amplify communicable and non-communicable diseases. And particularly what's happening is we have quite a range of climate-sensitive NCDs, and this is very problematic for South Africa, where we have the quadruple burden of non-communicable diseases. So one of the things that we've been looking at is to see, well, what are the medical curriculums incorporating or doing for the future doctors in terms of being able to address the diseases that they will see linked to climate change and environmental factors, and will they be able to actually identify them? The move globally is that medical schools have a responsibility to actually educate and make sure that the doctors are prepared for the types of diseases that they'll see. There seems to be a slip there. So just to show you briefly what's happening globally, the UK medical regulator in 2018 has mandated that all newly qualified doctors must be able to apply principles of sustainable healthcare to medical practice. And that the American Medical Association in June this year had an official policy where they're supporting teaching of climate change in undergraduate, graduate, and continual medical education, that doctors must have a basic knowledge of being able both to identify but also to counsel their patients in terms of exposure risk. So if you think of flooding that's happening and there's an increase in mold in the homes and patients are presenting them with respiratory effects, and if the doctor's not identifying where the exposure risks are happening, then you're going to have continued repeated cases. So just briefly as an overview, we could have a whole lecture just on the health effects of climate change, but just that there are increasing levels of CO2, rising sea levels, extreme weather events, I mentioned flooding, fires, we hear about all the time, and rising temperatures. And these climatic factors then impact on various determinants of health, such as severe weather, air pollution, changes in bacterial ecology, etc., which then impact on health effects. The one particular area that we're looking at as well is mental health issues. So just an overview of what is UCT doing at the moment in terms of their medical curriculum, and this is mostly focused on medical doctors, but in the first couple of years, some of the other health professions will have some information. So just very briefly, you can see in the first year, becoming a health professional, they have a half-an-hour lecture. In the second year, they have a case study. In the third year, there's nothing at the moment. We are working on it. Fourth year, they have a 2-hour block and a 1-hour block on climate change. Fifth year and sixth year, we're working on electives. So at the moment, it's very thin in terms of what's happening. So we had a special study module that was recently done by 2 students, Krital and Zayeda, and they looked at how to assess what the current students' perceptions are and to investigate their perceptions and their attitudes towards environmental sustainability and sustainable healthcare, and to make recommendations. And I need to mention also that my colleague James Erlin was supervising the students. The methods was a cross-sectional study. The students did a focus group pilot. They had 2 45-minute pilots with 5 females and 5 male students, crossing medical and physiotherapy students. And then they send out a WhatsApp to invite all of the 2,100 students to participate in an online Google survey, of which 264 students responded. And you will see the representation there that the health and rehab students there were 53%, and from medicine there was, sorry, not 53%, 53 students and 211 from medicine. And the representation between female and male, I think is indication of the student population that 74% were female and 25% were male. So just some of the overview quickly of some of the findings. So we found that 65% were aware but had little understanding of actually climate change, and only 31% had what we would have called a self-identified in-depth knowledge and understanding. And that the 5th and 6th years seem to have the most in-depth understanding, and that perhaps just could be in terms of their own investigations, whereas the 3rd and 4th year had least awareness. Because you could see that our curriculum isn't, at the moment, thorough throughout the years. What is interesting to see is when we're asked where their main source of information was coming from, 84% said the internet. I think that is a bit hair-raising from an academic perspective if our medical students are saying they're getting most of their information from the internet, whereas 31% said from curriculum and scientific journals. So I think that should perhaps be the one takeaway message. 64% did perceive climate change to have a high impact on their future patients, but that was just a perception rather than taking it any further in terms of knowledge. 63% said they did not recall having any lectures on climate change or environmental sustainability, or very little. And only 47% felt it was extremely important to teach students on climate change. Whereas, yet, as I mentioned, environmental factors and climate change are more impacting on the burden of disease. Asking them how they would prefer to be taught, interestingly enough, they said no assessment, which I thought was quite interesting. But they wanted facilitated group discussion. That's perhaps another conversation about the curriculum. Facilitated group discussion, peer-to-peer discussion, online interactive resources, case studies, and electives. And I do think we need to think about when we have a saturated curriculum, which we do have already with the medical curriculum, and have an important topic like climate change and environmental health, could one use more online interactive opportunities? So just very quickly, it was interesting that they have a strong understanding of the causes of climate change in terms of industrialization and human activities and fossil fuel. But when they were asked about what their role would be in terms of helping patients to understand the effects of climate change, you can see it was 36% talked about educating patients or advocating for greener practices, and 33% about the awareness of climate change and what their own behavior changes would need to be to protect their health. And reducing general and medical waste, only 10% felt that they could play a role in that. So I think there's a huge indication of issues that we need to address. Just in terms of challenges that the study is indicating, and as well as the other research that we've been working on that UCT is facing, and I've already mentioned, is how do we get climate change and environmental health, which is so important, into a very complex curriculum, and so that the students can actually know what the symptoms are and how to diagnose correctly and treat as well as prevent and play a role in prevention. The other thing is, how do we target health and rehab students throughout their curriculum, not just in the first couple of years? How do we, as an academic institution, have a continuing education program? So medical practitioners who are already practicing, how do we offer climate change and environmental health to them? And what is interesting is the need for more political support in terms of the fact that climate change and environmental health are issues that need to be on the agenda. So, for example, there was no mention of climate change or environmental health in the recent Minister's health budget, whereas you can see that in the UK and the US, it is much more on the agenda. So just in conclusion, So the perceptions and knowledge coming out from the students was that generally their knowledge is poor in relation to environmental sustainability. That sustainable healthcare education is critical, that we do need to have a conversation. We are having a conversation, but we need to have a much broader one. I mentioned that the curriculum is saturated and integration is not prioritized. And this is a challenge globally that's happening, not just at UCT. There is a global network that's working on to support universities on how to integrate climate change and environmental health into curriculum. And UCT needs to continue this integration, and also that UCT has a sustainability strategy proposal for integrating environmental sustainability into all teaching and learning at UCT. And perhaps this is an opportunity for the faculty, our faculty of health sciences, to lead in this opportunity. Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Mohammed?
Thank you, Andrea. You're raising a very important point around climate change. I want to just address one of your recommendations, the issue of integrating climate change into the curricula of health science students. Given the resistance and historical lack of interest in integrating public health concepts into the health sciences curricula, how do you suggest or propose including this aspect in the curriculum?
Thanks, Mohammed. That's a very important point and very well taken that we do need to heed to that issue. What's been happening at some universities in the US, and we don't have the staff to do that here, so perhaps the first level is to get more staff on board who can help with integration. But what they've been doing in the US is they've been looking at the medical curriculum as it exists. So they look at surgery, they look at medicine, they look at other components, and they put slides into those existing lectures. So they go to each program and have a battery of slides that they add into the existing curriculum of the other medical programs. But that takes staff and that takes planning. But that's how they've tackled it. So they've done this kind of mapping out what's being taught in the curriculum, how can you integrate into existing lectures already. So if it's already in pediatrics or something else. And I think that's a good approach, but it's quite a lot of work. Thanks. So are there any other questions? Yeah.
You mentioned a lot of students get information from the internet. So it's obviously a broad concept. So I don't know whether you or anyone else is trying to unpack what part of the internet they're getting information from. Because obviously the information quality is variable and you maybe sites that have quite good information on it. And I wonder if that's also an opportunity for us to direct students to sites that do have useful information.
So that's a good point, and thank you for that. And perhaps that's another study that we could do as a SSM, is actually just looking at their information and what they're getting, but also what they're using it for. And I must say, at the moment in our lectures, because they're so short, 3 hours or an hour, we actually are directing the students to the internet. We are showing them sites where they can go. The issue will be the quality control of the information created, but there definitely is a lot for health professionals in climate change on the internet that is worthy of using. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Andrea. Your presentation makes me think of an article by Russell Gruen about the differentiation of physicians, American physicians' professional responsibility versus their responsibility as citizens. He makes that distinction and uses a number of different examples of which climate change is one, putting it in the latter category rather than in the professional category, which is an interesting differentiation. What is the responsibility of professionals to engage with these issues as opposed to as individuals? Yeah, but it's just to get that reminder of that conceptually, how far are we expecting our graduates to go Because the same thing you said of, some of the big societal problems, trauma or nutrition or whatever, and that the bigger question is what sort of competencies can we expect, professional competencies can we expect all our fellows to have.
Yes, it's a very good point. It'd be interesting to take that up further. So what I didn't present is that we did ask the students quite a lot in terms of their own role in environmental sustainability. And they all were saying they were recycling, and I didn't put it up because it was all 85% said they were doing recycling and thinking about waste management and all that. But I think it's more nuanced than that, and I'm not sure that they're all practicing that. The interesting is when we teach them how to become a health professional, we're not really including that component of how to be a health professional in a sustainable world and sustainable healthcare. So it's a good point. Thank you. It's very fun.
Thank you very much, Tiger and Andrew, for your interesting presentation. Let's quickly do one on pesticides. Okay, the next project we're presenting is one which is part of which is linked to the pesticide study which I previously mentioned. It's a cohort study looking at effects of reproductive and neuro outcomes on of pesticides among school children. So this was an environmental study to see to what extent the communities in the study areas are exposed to pesticides. It is called, basically it was a water and air monitoring that was conducted over a period of 1 year. So this, for this particular paper project, data from 7 months of that sampling period was taken, and the project titled Temporal Variation in Pesticide Emissions in rivers in 3 agricultural watersheds during a major drought in the Western Cape. Basically, it was a master's project by Lou Couchard, who's from Erbach in Switzerland. And basically, the project was directly, mostly supervised by Samuel Fulman, who's a postdoc here as part of the chain environmental health. And basically, the project was done through collaborations through Swiss institutions and as well as South African institutions as well. So it's just some background. There's South Africa's leading pesticide use in sub-Saharan Africa. There's now lately been very few studies done in the last 10 years in African countries with regard to environmental sampling of pesticides in environmental media, and these studies had limitations, using grab samples, not integrated samples. A few pesticides, including few because of budgetary constraints, few pesticides were measured, and limited seasonal coverage, the temporal study period was over a short period of time. So in the in the more industrialized countries, there's this new technology which is called dream catchers, which uses passive samplers as a low, cost-effective and robust specimen monitoring screen, which we used for the study. Also, other important points to mention is that climate change may impact pesticide use and environmental state of chemicals, and that especially in the period of the drought can affect the transport of the chemicals in the rivers and the surface water. So the aim of the study was to investigate the comments of pesticides mixtures using this passive sampling method along 3 rivers in the 3 study areas. The period was between 2017 and 2018 during the drought period. So this gives an overview of the study areas. Basically, the coal study was done in these 3 areas, basically intensive agricultural areas with different crops being used in the different areas, and they have different climate factors, rainfalls being different. The 3 areas were Frabouw, Hicks River, and Piketberg, where the predominant farming activities is different in the 3 areas. So I summarized some of the business that were done. You can see that Samuel setting up the equipment. I think that is Landiri assisted him this study. So the study involved, first of all, looking at spray records of farmers in each of 3 areas. In total, there was about 38 records that were collected over the 3 areas. Then water sampling at one point in the river that went through all 3 agricultural areas, and we collected the sample. We placed the sampling at the point where downstream, after it has run through the agricultural area. The other data collected was rainfall, daily discharge data from the weather service determined pesticide concentration. So this technology actually determines if a pesticide is detected. It doesn't give you the concentration of the pesticide, but there is some equation that one can use to try and determine what the pesticide concentrations were. And then we also use land use irrigation data in terms of to determine the location of the areas. So the slide shows again the 3 areas. It shows the rivers that were used in the 3 areas: the Berg River, Hicks River, and Hicks River Valley, and Grabouw area as well. It shows a map of some of the river and the catchment areas in the study areas. This slide summarizes some of the spray records, from the spray records and also the pesticide detection. Basically, there was about 187 chemicals that were measured. Of these, 124 was registered in South Africa. That is 112 of the 700 pesticides registered in South Africa for those crops used in these areas. There was 33 of those. 33 of those 187 were actually present on the spray records of the farms that participated in the study. But in total, there was 99 pesticides that were reported by these farmers that was used during that period. And there's about 34 pesticides that were detected. Of those, 13 were ones that were reported by the farmers that they sprayed those pesticides during that period, which means that 21 was not reported, but that could have been sprayed by farmers that did not take part in the study. So in total, in Grabouw, there was about 71 pesticides were detected, in Hicks River Valley 48, and Piketberg 36. This includes some of commonly used pesticides. The most commonly used pesticide in terms of the amount that was used included fungicides, that's listed like mancozeb is commonly used, herbicides as well, glyphosate is quite well known as well, and G as well, and then the insecticide of chlorpyrifos, which is quite topical because of its toxic effects and also has been detected in various environmental media in South Africa and in other countries as well. This slide shows a heat map of the pesticides detected. In total, 53 compounds were detected. The slide gives you an indication of the names, so I can't mention all the names, but it included fungicides, herbicides, and insecticides. The TP stands for transformation products, which is basically products that are that are the transformation products from the parent compound after it breaks down into the water. So the red shows the detections, the other shows that there will be no detection, and it shows that in all 3 areas there were detections. The mostly Grabouw, 26 compounds was detected, and 28 in Piketberg, and then in Hicks River Valley there was about 11 that were detected. And it shows that there were regular detection during the period of July to January, which was the study period for this area, and there was regular detections for those pesticides that were detected in study during that study period. The slide might be a bit unclear, but what it tries to do, it tries to then convert those detections into concentrations. The bar shows the range of concentrations that were measured. The dot shows the environmental quality limit for those pesticides. Unfortunately, there isn't any South African limit because for all these pesticides, we had to use those of Switzerland. It shows that the pesticides that were detected were generally below, the average levels were below those of the environmental limits. But importantly, that some of them came quite close to those limits. And also, these are average amounts, so there were some individual ones that were exceeded those limits as well. And this included the pesticide component, of course, the ones that twice it did exceed those limits. Yeah, so that's basically important thing on the slide. The slide shows trying to do show a relationship between the pesticide detected and those being sprayed, the time that it was sprayed. So the one slide, the C, shows the pesticide being sprayed. You can see that most were in the period of September and October. In the Piketberg area, there's some spraying in July and August as well. The detections were, if you look at the last one, the E, which is trying to estimate the amount of detections, it falls more or less during the spraying period, although there were some detections outside the spraying period. And also important to note is that the rainfall, the discharge data, was quite higher in Grabouw than in the X-River and Piketberg. So that rainfall could also be a factor which transport the pesticides in the rivers and enhances contamination of its detection in the water systems. This slide shows to show the relationship, temporal relationship between the detection of the pesticide and the 11 pesticides that were reported by the farmers that had sprayed the pesticide. So this one was for the vascular, it was a fungicide, somebody used fungicide. It shows that the bar shows the spraying, and then soon after that you see that there's a detection of that pesticide, which shows that the spraying is quite a strong predictor of when the pesticides get detected, which is what we expect. There was also overall analysis of trying to look at the probability of a pesticide being detected in relation to its spraying for over this period. So the Kappa analysis was done, and the Kappa result was 0.9, so there's quite high correlation between spraying of those little pesticides and its detection. So the limitation in the study is the spraying records was from a small group of farmers. It's only 7% of the farmers in those three areas. The analytical procedure did not include some of the most commonly used pesticides in the report, like mancozeb and glyphosate, because of the analytical one is more advanced procedures to try and detect those pesticides. Passive water samples were collected over a 2-week period every month instead of for the whole month. So there's a time period where some of the peak concentration might have been missed. The full spraying record was not covered, as you can see. And however, the important thing is that a broad range of compounds were measured in different watersheds with little infrastructure, so we've got a good practical method of measuring upstream the pesticides in these areas. So the conclusions is that a wide variety of pesticide compounds are present in the stream during the agricultural watershed. There was a strong agreement with this spatial temporal relationship between the application, the current of within the river were found. And that the study was done under extreme weather conditions, and it would be interesting to see when it's repeated under normal conditions as well. So that's the end of the presentation. I'd like to acknowledge the participants, staff and collaborators, as well as the funders that are listed on the study. Any questions? And yeah.
I was curious about the core transformation projects.
Yeah.
Because with climate change, we know that a lot of people are breaking down into different products and more, sometimes more hazardous ones. Was there any way for you to see whether that was sort of a natural breakdown that you expected to occur, or was there a possibility that high temperatures and climate issues would be causing the impact of some of the transformation?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. We didn't analyze the data to that extent. It's a bit difficult. A lot of these compounds do have natural transfer. I don't want to call them breakout. I know individually do one launching breakout products in the body we get other, but that happens. The same thing happens in the environment as well. Whether it happens a bit more during different climatic conditions, that's the interesting question. We couldn't really say, but stuff is more, that's probably requires the analysis. There's another question. Yes.
So did I think I said there was one pesticide that you found that was not registered in South Africa? And it was different to what pesticide was that? Also, is this evidence that there's drift from other farms? That not because the farm you surveyed didn't use the pesticide, found the pesticide?
It could be that basically what it could be that the spraying in other farms could affect it. It wasn't listed by the farmer that participated, so that is about only 7% of the, although most of them in the different areas you do use a similar spraying protocol for the different crops, but it could be that there is some differences because of the export markets, so they could use different pesticides. So it's probably likely that it was sprayed by other farmers. In terms of the illegal pesticide, I didn't think there wasn't one that was not registered.
What was registered and what was found?
Sorry? Okay. Yeah. Wait. Oh. Yeah. So no, basically it says that not registered in South Africa. Yeah. Sorry.
34 and 33 and 39.
Yeah. No, basically 34 were detected, of which 30, all of them were registered in South Africa. Yeah. And 13 were on spraying reports. Yeah, 34. Yeah. Yeah, there wasn't any. There might be. Sorry about that. You're right. There could be one that was, but there isn't actually one that we found that was not registered. So maybe that's just a number that's not actually. Okay. Any other questions? At the moment.
No, I was pointing to you, so John saw you.
So I may have missed this. Was this aerial spraying or was it local spraying by individual workers of the fields?
Basically all spraying. So basically it was done, the study was done during the spraying period and spraying.
I'm interested in whether it was done by aerial spray or was it mainly by individual workers of the crops? And what proportions were aerial versus the other?
Yeah. So in the Pickenberg area, there's a good point. Yeah, that could affect. There's a bit of aerial spraying. In the other areas, there isn't much aerial spraying. Mostly on the farms using blowers and sprayers. In the Pickenberg area, there is a bit of spraying. Is that all the questions? Okay, so now we'll move to the next item, which is a video by students in the using a single science.
Video came in at 3 o'clock this morning from the University of Massachusetts, so that's why it's not uploaded. So it's very public. Yes.
So much on this. Okay. Right, before we show you the video, we just wanted to say good morning to everyone and just introduce ourselves. My name is Maxine Grassel, and this is my peer and colleague, Tainton Lowe. We are MPH students in the environmental health track, and today we just wanted to show you a video that we've done for World Environmental Health Day.
I
I think my voice is good. Is it what sorry, okay, so excellent. So plastic is something that is not a stranger to us, right? If we were to empty all the bags in the room, you would find a plastic object. Even I see the land, the notes with the little, student cards. If you were to play I Spy in the room, you would find something that is plastic. But alas, my word is not enough, and I Spy is not enough. We need evidence. Evidence. So I did a little very basic PubMed search where I just said plastics in the environment. This wasn't a Medi-Shelton at the library search, and I got thousands of articles that popped up. And if we're not careful with our plastic usage, I think this literature is just going to increase. So we are producing a shocking amount of over 300 million tons of plastic per year, which 50% of that plastic is single-use plastic. And as researchers in the environmental health track, we are particularly interested in the impact that plastic has on our health. 2/3 of all plastic ever produced that is released into the environment remain in the environment, and as well as into our body, like microplastic particles. Research, however, on the impacts of plastic in the environment is plenty, but according to a report by the WHO, which was released 2019, there's still many yet to be proven theories of plastic impact on our health. One of that was the possibility of chemical contaminants from microplastics transferring to humans through food is not yet fully understood and therefore warrants extra research to be done. And with that being said, we feel that the precautionary principle should therefore still be taken into account because there is still many research that does prove that plastic is detrimental to our health. And yeah, that's going over to you.
Okay, so World Environmental Health Day is going to be on the 26th of September. And the theme this year is Climate Change Challenges, Time for Global Environmental Health to Act in Unison. So as Tatum has mentioned, plastic has can have a really big impact on the environment as well as human health. And so this video was done to further explore these impacts and to try and figure out ways in which we can start to better the situation that we currently find ourselves in. So we'd like to thank Prof. Rotha for making this video possible. We'd like to thank Roxanne Dalton, who did all the filming and the editing and the directing, and she is absolutely amazing at what she does, and I will promote her to the end of the earth. If you ever need a video project done, I highly recommend her. Furthermore, we'd like to thank all the people and organizations that allowed us to interview them, some of them which are in this very room. And I think the main message we would like to convey today is that each and every single one of us has a role to play as consumers in reducing our plastic consumption and our plastic usage. So for World Environmental Health Day, we are actually currently trying to make it a plastic-free and single-use container-free day on campus. So please watch this space and enjoy our video. Thanks.
I think it's really on plastic breakdown in the environment. It's a long time, it's like 50 years plus. If it is biodegradable,
the later time for plastic to break down takes,
is it 30 years or something?
At least more than 10 years to break down.
Years and years. Like you can see plastic hundreds of years and it's still there.
I don't know, forever.
Single-use plastic products are plastics that you only use once. And straws.
Items that are plastic which have very, very short functional life.
Created and produced without the end goal in sight. Non-biodegradable and also non-reusable. It's deemed for landfill in the ocean. So these are the products that we need to focus on and that we need to find alternatives to. there's a very wide range of plastics developed, and the chemicals used for different plastics can be very varied. When you have the plastic in its form as a pellet, it's distributed to various organizations, companies, that then put it into a machine, melt it down, mold it into something, and then you have your product. The range of chemicals used in plastic production is enormous. Many of them are hazardous in different ways. If we keep going on like we're going, there will be more plastic in the ocean than there's fish. And I mean, how can that be? 54% of all plastics goes into packaging.
On average, our consumers purchase around 100 million plastic bags per year.
Modern day food retail is riddled with single-use plastic because it is so convenient and very effective at prolonging the shelf life of foods. We all like chips and chocolate and coffee and all these things, you know. But there are shops opening up now, and there are easy ways to go around it. There's good foods in town. The move away from single-use plastic is really what's motivated creating new foods. There wasn't an alternative way of shopping in Cape Town or in South Africa, actually. More and more customers are making their choice based on their sustainability initiatives, based on their purpose, based on their strategy, based on what they do. Keep buying these things, they'll keep selling these things to us.
The less demand is for plastic bags, the less we need to provide for them. But with the customers like that, we're going to start providing them within the next 18 months or so.
We have a responsibility as a business for things that are not always directly commercial with commercial and financial benefit. And at the end of the day, to have as little impact on the environment as possible.
I think we went out with it in June 2018, where we said we're on a journey of zero packaging waste to landfills.
Our waste can be resourceful and that we can use it. For example, with the EcoBrick, we should use the EcoBrick as a tool to connect with our waste and find out what we are using and then identify those materials and start to phase them out.
Currently, about 20% of our waste is recycled, and about 14% of that is food.
Okay, so the recycling bins are on campus, they're easy to identify. The green one is recycling and the other one is non-recycling.
I see colors and I don't pay attention to.
I don't know what the difference mean. I just think when I see green, it's either paper or plastic. I don't know how to break it up further.
The best advice I can give to any one person in their own personal capacities, in their households or in their businesses, is to start somewhere. Start by finding reusable alternatives.
At home, separate your plastic from your paper, from your carton, because it makes it easier for when you dispose of it.
Always ensure that your material that you separate for recycling is as clean as possible. Start supporting businesses and brands and products that take sustainability and single-use waste seriously. To educate yourself. It is a technical area.
It has to start from us taking a personal responsibility to make conscious choices to avoid plastic.
Plastic is bad, guys, so let's move away from plastic.
Use glass. That's the best advice that I can give a person.
Go to your mom and get a pick a bag through the bag, and I'm sure all of our moms got one of those.
At least have their own water bottle, especially people in rest that they don't have to take bottles every single day.
Be conscious in what you do, to be environmentally. Because I mean, it's our earth, you're living in. No matter how little your effort is, it counts. And if we all use plastic, we will have a nice plastic-free future.
Thank you very much for that presentation slash poster. Oh, sorry, slash the video. Without further ado, I think it's time for us to take a tea break, except if we have questions specifically. Very, very, very short questions. Okay.
And other babies as well. What is the use and how you're on safe for places in their masses?
So luckily Roxanne is actually an alumni student of the UCT Film and Media Studies, so she has access to lots of consent forms. But yeah, essentially if you want to show people's faces, you need to get them to sign an appearance form, which basically just allows them to give you consent to show their face. That's why we are trying to avoid faces in the public, the general public. And so we only really included faces of people we interviewed, just because and anyone that was sort of an extra, we made sure they signed an agreement. Yeah. Anyone else?
Thank you very much. So we'll break for tea and we'll come back. Because of interest of time, we'll just do 15 minutes tea. Is that okay? So we'll reconvene in 15 minutes. Thank you.